We were locked up 24/7 with a light burning 24/7. This cell had no window to outside. So for 12 years, 8 months, I never saw the sun, the moon. I didn't know when it was day or night. I have a recreation I made of this prison. I hope it works. No, sorry, it doesn't work. I was fed once a day on a half cup of rice and a half cup of cabbage leaves. We got water once a month for 2 hours. The toilet consisted of a hole in the corner of this room, just a hole in the floor. It had no running water and it couldn't flush. I don't know if you can imagine what it feels like. 50 guys in a room using that toilet 24/7 and you can only clean it once a month. The smell, believe it or not, you get used to it. After a couple of weeks, you smell nothing. But the sight of that mess drove me nuts. As part of our punishment, the guards would come every morning, starting one end of the prison, using wooden clubs the size of baseball bats. They would systematically go from cell to cell to cell and beat each and every prisoner. I had no contact with the outside world. I wasn't allowed on visits, letters. There was no books. There was no telephone calls. There was no TV. I smuggled hundreds of letters out of that prison. Out of the hundreds of letters, I know of only one that ever made it to outside. That letter ended up with a magazine in South Africa who printed it. At that stage, South Africa had a population of 47 million people. I know of one person that actually read the letter and did something about it. His name was Philip Albertine. He was a young kid, college kid. Philip was instrumental over the next couple of years in establishing a support group that eventually spanned the world. He had governments around the world calling on the president of Zimbabwe to release me. A few years into my sentence, I got extremely ill and needed to see a doctor. When a doctor was finally allowed to examine me, he diagnosed prostate cancer and ordered immediate operation. It took a while before I was allowed to go for an operation, which was a drama in itself in Africa. In the next years, I went for 7 such operations as the disease spread. 12 years, 8 months into my sentence, the doctors called me in and said to me, "Reon, we have a slight bit of bad news for you. There's nothing more medically we can do for you. You are terminal and have 6 months to live." I can never find the words to describe what goes through your mind when doctors give you that news. But I knew. For 12 years, I survived. But I knew that was the end. My body was so weak. I didn't have a tooth in my mouth. I weighed 47 kilograms, and I was dying. About a month after they told me that, I woke up one morning. They opened the door, and they said to me, "Get dressed." I said, "Where are we going?" They said, "Just get dressed." I knew that day if they beat me, I wouldn't get back up. My body just didn't want to cooperate anymore. They took me down the stairs to the reception of this prison, and I walked into the most press I've ever seen in my life. The whole world press was waiting for me. They were all shouting, "What does it feel like to be pardoned and going home?" Well, to say I was surprised and stunned is putting it mildly. For the first time in 12 years, 8 months, I saw white people. Suddenly they're telling me I'm free. And I stood there and I was trying to compute this. I made it. I survived 18 years of war, 7 operations for cancer, 12 years, 8 months in the worst prison. And all that could go through my mind was, I made it. I survived. While I was talking to the press, one of the people tapped me on the shoulder and he gave me a cell phone. He said, Reon, somebody wants to speak to you. And he handed me the phone. I took the cell phone, I looked at it. Now, when I left South Africa in 1992 to cross that border, we had no cell phones. We had no laptops. We had no internet. We had no DVDs. I was on ice for 12 years. So when this guy gave me the cell phone and I looked at it, I thought, okay, this is a cell phone because the guards told me about cell phones. World press watching, try and look intelligent. Somebody tapped me again on the shoulder and he said, speak, Reon. And I went, hello, come in, over. They put me on a plane and flew me back to my country. Man, what a day it was. I landed in South Africa. And once again, the world press was waiting for me at the airport. They told me I did not work for them. I worked for the apartheid regime, and I'm going back on trial as a war criminal. They told me that out of a family of 7, I lost 6. I made it. I was back in my country. They didn't want me. They was going to put me back on trial. I had no family. I had no job. And I was terminally ill. And all those years, I always asked myself, why? Why is this happening to me? You know, I'm a good guy. I'm just a soldier. And that day when I stood in that airport in South Africa, man, I was the lowest point of my life. I thought, you got to be shitting me. How did I survive all this for this? Why couldn't I just be killed in the beginning? But then I realized the question I've been asking all those years was the wrong question. I shouldn't have been asking why. I should have been asking what for? What is this happening to me for? What am I supposed to learn from this? And the what for is this. For the last 7 years, I've been traveling the world, sharing my story. I have spoken probably 900 conferences or more around the world. I've spoken to more than 1 million people face to face. And I'm also very happy to share with you today that today is the pre-launch of my book that will be out in December. I have made a special package for EO Alchemy specifically. If you pre-order the book, your name will go into a raffle and you can win a 3-day retreat in Nosara, Costa Rica with me and 9 people of your choice. Now, this sounds like a sob story. It sounds like a sad story, but believe me, it's not. It's a story of overcoming. It's a story of survival. And it's a story that taught me so many lessons. All the lessons I've learned in Chikurubi, I would never in my life have learned it anywhere else under any circumstances. How do I tell you my whole story in 17 minutes? It's impossible. So you need to book me to hear my full story, or you need to come to my workshop tomorrow, which is 90 minutes, so I can share with you some of these lessons. My book shares these lessons and goes in how you can put them to practice in your own life. I'm just going to illustrate 3 little lessons I learned. I learned that the word failure doesn't exist for me. Failure can only be a reality the moment you stop trying or give up. If I stopped trying to smuggle letters out of that prison, I wouldn't be here today. If I gave up when those guards were beating me and told me I'm dying, I wouldn't be here today. If I believed those doctors 7 years ago, I wouldn't be here today. So to me, failure can only become a reality the moment you give up or you stop trying. You know, when you go from 3-4 meals a day to one, man, you get hungry. Shit, believe me, I've been hungry. And I learned it wasn't the food that was a problem, the amount of food, the amount of times I got it. The problem was me. Because for 3 years, I ate that food and I was alive. I didn't look well, didn't feel well, but I was alive. So it wasn't the circumstances, the conditions, or the food that was a problem. I was the problem. Because I didn't want to accept it. But the moment I accepted it, everything changed. I'm out of time. But as entrepreneurs, I think you can understand that, you know, yesterday, 7 years ago, my life was over. I was locked up in a prison and I was dying. Today, 7 years ago, my life began because that door opened. So what a difference a day can make in our lives. You guys that take risks all the time, you know what difference a day can make. So it doesn't matter how dark things are, doesn't matter how hard things seem, what kind of hassles you have in your life. Always remember, a day, an hour, a couple of minutes, your whole life can change. And I think many of you have been there and experienced that. I want you to remember this. Remember my story. And if I could have achieved what I have achieved today, uneducated, how much more can each one of you in this room achieve in your lives? Thank you for listening, and the forms for my book, if you want to pre-order, is in the back of the room. I appreciate your time, and please join me for my workshop tomorrow for 90 minutes. Thank you.